Welcome back to the Florida Food Forest. My name's Shani. I'm a Zone 9B gardener in Sorrento, Florida. And today we are going to be talking about all things fall gardening in Florida. It is a gorgeous day here in early September, and we are going to be covering everything from bed prep, soil prep, irrigation techniques, and we are going to finish off the video with a comprehensive list of what to grow. And as a bonus, I'm going to add in the handiest free resource for gardeners in Florida. So let's get started. Now, I am a native New Englander. I'm from Rhode Island originally, so I grew up gardening in a totally different climate where we battled a brutal long winter, but then we got to enjoy a glorious but brief summer gardening season. And if you garden up north, you typically have one very important date that you always have in your mind. That would be your average last frost date. Ours was May 15th. Every home gardener, every garden center abides by this date. We know that we have to have our seedlings ready to set out just after May 15th. We know that we cannot direct sow our frost-sensitive crops until after May 15th. This is about all you need to know if you're going to be gardening up north with a shorter season. When I moved to the Missouri Ozarks, it wasn't much different. The average last frost date there was April 17th, but other than that, there wasn't much to know. The dates were hard and set, and everybody was on the same page, in the same gardening rhythm. Even if you went over to the big box stores for the garden centers, they all had seedlings ready at the appropriate time. Then I moved to Central Florida and everything was flipped upside down. When I moved to Central Florida, I learned that summers are just too hot for most annual vegetable crops. So then you look at winter, and that's a lovely season. However, there is a risk of frost and freeze in the wintertime, so that's not a great time to grow your frost-tender annual vegetables. So what are you to do? You look to the shoulder seasons, to spring and fall. These are small but distinct windows in Florida where we can get some really wonderful weather, average temperatures in the mid-70s, and it's a sustained period of time where we can actually get a good crop of those more temperature finicky annual vegetable crops. So it is early September. We are on the precipice of the fall gardening season. This is the absolute best time of year if you ask me. Let's talk about what crops we can get in the ground and what we're going to need to do to get them planted. Right off the bat, let me share with you that little secret cheat code that I have for Florida gardeners because it's very handy. This is the UF IFAS monthly planting infographic series. Because of Florida's unique climate and very narrow planting windows, I've found it's very helpful to use this guide to know which crops can be planted when. Otherwise, it can be pretty chaotic and you might be all over the place in your gardening schedule. So this was created by the University of Florida because UF is a land-grant university, which means in part it receives federal funding to provide practical and research-based education in agriculture and science to the public through cooperative extension services. This is a monthly planting calendar that provides research-based monthly planting guides for the home gardener for free. If you want to find it, it's very easy. Type into your search bar IFAS monthly planting infographic, and you're going to keep these on your phone. You can download them for reference, or you can keep them printed out in your house. But it's an incredible free resource that every gardener in Florida should be using. It's just going to take away a lot of the gray area. It's going to, no fuss, tell you what can you get in the ground each month. There are other helpful hints on these infographics. It's going to lay out whether you should be direct seeding or transplanting each crop. And they just released a monthly infographic series for flowers. So before they had just had vegetable growing guides, but now they have flower planting calendars as well. It's a very, very useful tool. I use this all the time in my garden. I absolutely reference them every month because it's really easy to get confused or forget. Even for me, when I do this all the time, Florida is just much more complicated than anywhere else that I've gardened. Now, I find this guide alone is good enough for most of my gardening needs. However, you can find some excellent local garden experts who have created free monthly planting guides, like Grower Jim or Nick's Edibles. These are even more comprehensive lists. They include lesser known crops that do well around here but have yet to be researched and verified by the university. So if you can compile the IFAS planting guides with Grower Jim and Nick's Edibles, this is going to give you a wealth of information. A lot of gardeners around here have done tons of trial and error, figuring out exactly when the ideal time to plant their seeds is. And you really want to pull from that experience and knowledge of others because it's just such a long, super hot season around here. It can be tricky. Now let's go over my personal list of favorite crops to plant in fall with some specific variety suggestions. First, let's start off with the long season solanaceous crops, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. I love these crops in fall, and you can see that mine are already well on their way and we're in early September. Here's the thing, if you're watching this video right now, early September, it's a bit late to start peppers, eggplants, tomatoes from seed. You're going to want to be transplanting them out into your garden around now. So what I recommend is you reach out to your local gardening group. There's definitely someone local, maybe a farmer, maybe a backyard grower, who's doing a seedling sale in September. This is the peak season for a good seedling sale from one of your local growers, and it's wonderful to support them. So it's a bit late if you're watching this right now. If you're watching this and it is still summer in Florida, by all means, late July, early August, get your seeds out, start your eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, tomatillos. Those kinds of crops can be started in late summer. They have to be babied along, but this is the time we're going to be transplanting them out, September. Tomato varieties that I can't get enough of, I've got to have black cherry tomatoes every year. That's a must. They are so delicious and they grow really well in my area. Green zebras are another one, super easy, disease resistant, absolutely productive and tasty. They have a nice citrusy tang to them. I also am going for Container's Choice this year. I'm trying another variety called Yaki that is more of a paste tomato. I always stand by the Tyron F1 from Johnny's Seeds. That is another wonderful paste tomato, but they were sold out this year. Granadero is another multi-purpose tomato that I love that has done very well for me in the fall. Moving on to peppers, I have to have lemon drop peppers every year. That's a capsicum baccatum. They have a citrusy flavor. They make the best lacto-fermented hot sauce. Gotta have it. Of course, we do a jalapeno. It's nice to have some poblanos. And I'm going to have, of course, Thai chilies because I do a ton of Indian and Asian cooking, and Thai chilies are a must for that kind of cooking. Now for sweet peppers, I usually mess with a Jimmy Nardello. I don't get into too many bell peppers in my garden. I love bell peppers, but they are just a pain in the butt to grow. If anybody here has mastered the bell pepper, get at me. I'd love to be able to grow a really nice, big, fat bell pepper. Until then, I'm just enjoying my Jimmy Nardellos because they're a little easier. Eggplants, I go for the small jewel type varieties. Those are super easy to grow and productive, and I like to make those into stir fries. And then, of course, I usually go for a large Black Beauty, Aswad, one of the large fruiting varieties, because I love to make Baigan Bharta. That's the quintessential eggplant dish in India, and I make it almost every week in my house, so I have to have a bunch of big eggplants around. Moving on, the rest of these crops are direct sown, and they can be started from here on out, from September on out. We have things like cucumbers. I am a particular fan of the variety Muncher. That one has thin skin, ultra productive, got a little bit of disease resistance on that one, and eating quality is very, very high. Of course, lots of people go for the Marketmore 76 because it is reliable. It's got a thicker skin, which does help it to stand up to some pest pressure a little bit better. Highly reliable and not bad to eat. Of course, you got to get some pickling cucumbers in there as well. Melons are a tricky one. We love melons. Who doesn't love to eat a delicious melon? But melons are highly frost sensitive and they're pretty long to mature. So that puts them in the category of risky in the fall because they could be killed off by a rogue frost or freeze before you get to enjoy them. So the best bet is to go for the shortest maturity days on your melon variety. Check out Minnesota Midget, or if you can get your hands on apple melon seeds, that is a variety that actually has an edible skin. It's a Korean type melon. It's got a bit of a different flavor, very sweet and crispy, texture wonderful. It's just not quite as musky as, say, a cantaloupe. But the apple melon is much shorter to maturity, so I love a fall crop of apple melon. Highly recommend, or try the Minnesota Midget. Then we have the category of brassicas. Now, September would be the very earliest you could start your brassicas because these crops, this is the mustard family or the cabbage family, they do not like excessive heat. So we are going to maybe look towards October to start our brassicas. Things like kale, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. Then we have arugula and radishes. These are also members of the brassica family. Now, keep in mind, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale to an extent, these really prefer to be started in trays and transplanted into the garden. Next, we have the Apiaceae family, the carrot family. I wait until October to start these, but we have things like carrots, which I always direct seed. Dill, you can transplant or direct seed that one. We've got fennel bulb, again, transplant or direct seed, your choice. Fennel is one of those crops that I am obsessed with. I actually have an entire detailed growing guide. Check that out on my channel if you want to learn absolutely everything about growing big fat bulbs of fennel. We also have celery. I have grown beautiful crops of celery here in Florida, particularly the pink Chinese celery. That one does really, really well in the winter here. It's unique, it's beautiful, it adds such a beautiful pop of color to the garden, and it's easier to grow. Definitely get some pink celery in your fall garden. Of course, we're going to wait until October for things like lettuces and spinach because they are super cold sensitive and they will not tolerate September and its occasional heat spikes. Then we are going to jump to a very unusual but beloved crop of mine. I love puntarelle chicory. This is a traditional Italian chicory that makes funky little heads. They're these finger-like inflorescence. They look a little bit like blanched asparagus. But I love puntarelle chicory. It's one crop that I have found does beautifully in fall in Florida. That's one that I won't miss out on, and it's a ton of fun to grow. Very unique crop, very bitter in flavor, but there are some traditional Italian preparations that really bring out the flavor, and it's deeply nutritious as well. Let's talk about soil amendment and bed prep. Now, when I am prepping my beds, it's pretty simple. I'm going to get in with a pitchfork or broad fork, whatever I have, and fluff up the soil, work that texture. Next, I am going to add a good helping of well-rotted compost, rabbit manure, crab meal, azomite, micronutrient mix. I'm really just trying to replenish anything that I've lost over the summer season. Sometimes I have a cover crop in to keep things anchored, sometimes I don't. This year I did not get a cover crop into my raised beds, so I definitely want to make sure that I give a good helping of all those amendments to make sure I make up for what I lost. Also, my soil line went down in my raised beds over the summer, so I'm just going to top off with some good quality raised bed mix that I have handy. This might also be the time that you're pulling your clear plastic after solarizing for the summer. Get that plastic back and add some nutrients to your soil if you can. Now, if you did solarize, there is quite a bit of contention around if you've solarized whether you should add compost and amendments to your soil, because you could, in theory, be adding weed seeds back into the soil that you just sterilized. I have heard folks on both sides of the aisles of this argument. I don't really have a preference either way. I have tried solarizing. It's worked fairly well for me in the past. I haven't needed to solarize these beds at my current location yet. I solarized when I was growing in a community garden. So that is going to be sort of a trial and error personal preference on your part if you did solarize. Next, I'm going to check on my irrigation lines because I haven't had to run my irrigation all summer long. I let these beds kind of shut down over the summer. Even if I had a few crops growing, they were doing fine with just my summer rains. So I'm going to do a test run of all of my drip line irrigation, make sure everything's in working order, and get that all running like a top. Finally, I'm going to put in my garden structures. I've got metal conduit to build a cucumber trellis. I have got garden T-posts to do my Florida weave on my tomatoes. I'm gonna get that in before I plant, ideally. Thanks for joining me today for the Florida Fall Growing Guide. Now I better get going because I've got lots of plants to put in the ground. See you next time.